And welcome to today's webinar on zone pushing. My name is Deborah, and I'm a volunteer at the Minnesota State Horticultural Society. Tonight's presenters are Gail Hudson and Marcus Phelps-Munson. If you are not a member of MSHS, now is a good time to join. Members receive not only our award-winning magazine, but also discounts at nurseries and greenhouses, free tickets to our local home show, free webinars, and more. Your membership dollars also allow us to bring great programming like this to all of you. And now, please welcome today's speakers. Gail Hudson is a multiple Emmy award-winning storyteller, a writer, photographer, and video producer with a master's degree in horticulture from the University of Minnesota. She writes and photographs gardens for Northern Gardener magazine. She's also a garden coach and landscape designer for homeowners in the metro area and out of state. Gail owns Gail Hudson Media, a video production and communications company, working with many clients, including the University of Minnesota Extension team of horticulture educators. Gail is the co-author of The 10 Plants Teacher Activities Handbook from 2017, a companion to 10 Plants That Changed Minnesota, a Minnesota Historical Society textbook, which is taught by hundreds of middle and high schools across the state. The creator of this garden that we are going to be touring will also be joining us tonight. Marcus Phelps-Munson started gardening when he was 8 years old in West Palm Beach, Florida, when he dug a little vegetable garden. So he's always had a fondness for plants. About 15 years ago, Marcus and his husband, Gary Epperly, lived in Sammamish, 30 miles east of Seattle, where he joined his first garden club. In 2018, he moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, and quickly got involved in his local garden club in St. Anthony Park, as well as the Minnesota chapter of the North American Rock Garden Society. He then became a Ramsey County Master Gardener. Marcus is a graphics designer, and as you will see, he has an eye for color, pattern, and combining elements in his garden. We are going to start everyone off tonight with a poll. So I am launching a poll. Everyone should have it pop up on screen. We're just asking that you tell us what your hardiness zone is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Deborah. Good evening, and thank you for the lovely introduction. My thanks to the Minnesota State Horticulture Society for asking me to speak to you tonight. And hello to everyone joining us in the Minnesota region and outside Minnesota. We have some folks from Florida, California, and several other places. A warm welcome to you, and I don't mean the 90-degree heat that we've been experiencing here in Minnesota. We're thrilled you've joined us, or if you're watching at a later time. And I encourage you to use the chat tonight to share your thoughts. It's much more fun when we're all interacting with each other. So please let us know where you're from. If you'd like, what your favorite plant is this time of year. I'd have to say for me, it's peonies. And what you think of what you're seeing as we take you on this virtual garden tour. So, and most importantly, as Deborah mentioned, if you have a question, put it in the chat and we'll get to your questions at the end of the program. So before we dive into our topic today, just gotta go one more here. There we go. Just a reminder how restorative gardens can be for all of us dealing with the end of the pandemic and the impacts of getting back to normal life. To quote the words of author Sue Stuart-Smith, a British psychotherapist who has observed, gardening is about setting life in motion, and seeds help us recreate the world anew. And that's from her new book, The Well-Gardened Mind. I think I've got that right in the camera. It's probably backwards, where she examines the remarkable, powerful effects of nature on our health and well-being. It's well worth reading and well worth considering. Not only is gardening restorative, but can be joyful, and it can be particularly fun when you push the envelope of our climate a little. So I visited the Phelps Munson Epperly Garden in St. Paul throughout the summer last year and wrote this cover story for January's Northern Gardener magazine, Let the House Plants Out. And today we'll go much more, it's a kind of a deep dive, I'd call it, into this garden, and you'll see many more photos than we could ever put in the whole magazine of Marcus's garden. So we will do a tour of the garden. We will talk about zone pushing plants, some great zone pushing plants that you may not have thought about trying in your garden. And some are tender and some are zone 4, so that we can take advantage of some of the beautiful plants that Marcus is growing too. Marcus also has an incredible collection of bromeliads, and he also loves to have a little bit of the rare and unusual in his garden. Marcus and I will be chatting about overwintering techniques. So if you are interested in doing a little zone pushing too, and Marcus has some gardening tips he'll share, and resources for the plants you're seeing and information. And of course, we'll talk about the questions. So I want to introduce Marcus Phelps Munson, the gardener behind it all. Marcus, maybe you want to turn your camera on.
Yeah.
There you are.
Everybody.
Hello, Marcus.
Hi.
Marcus is joining me tonight from San Jose, California. So I bet it's not as hot there as it is here.
No, we're actually having a bit of a cool spell right now, so I welcome that.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. It sounds wonderful.
Yes.
So as Deb had mentioned, about 15 years ago, Marcus moved to the Seattle area, lived in Sammamish, 30 miles east until he moved to Minnesota about 3 years ago. So what were the conditions like there in near Seattle?
Well, the conditions in Sammamish, just outside Seattle, Washington, is a little bit cooler than it is actually over in Seattle, but it's very moderate. In the winter, it might snow, but it goes away in a day. And there is an abundance of rain, which is wonderful. It doesn't usually come all at once. There's a little bit constantly, except for a short dry period in the summer. But it's very conducive to gardening. It's almost easy.
That's good, but the water is a little bit challenging, right? For some
Well,
plants.
it can be, yes, because there is such an abundance of water that I would have to amend the soil to increase drainage, because yes, a lot of plants don't like that. Even something as a rhododendron, they like water, but during that period in the summer, if it's wet and hot, they do not like that. They need it to dry out during that time.
Wow. So you're looking at a photo of Marcus's backyard, and this was when you moved in. It was just grass, right?
Yes, it was just a large square of grass with we had a big dog. So in designing this, we tried to accommodate running room for the dog, as well as slowly putting in plants over a 12-year period.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you certainly accomplished that, and I know that you travel with an empty suitcase, right?
It,
2
it's
suitcases, one for your clothes and one for the
Yes, it's empty on the way out and full of plants on the way back. Yes,
plant.
I like to
Okay.
visit nurseries.
So that's a fun souvenir, I think, that all gardeners can relate to. And I just wanted to point out a couple of plants that actually are zone friendly for us, that are in this backyard. Actually, the two trees. So this, first of all, this one on the right is a golden locust tree. It's a zone 4 tree and fast growing, droopy leaves that stay sunny yellow from spring until frost, which is really attractive. Fragrant white flowers in late spring and early summer. And then the flowers, after the flowers, you get these smooth brown seed pods that are also pretty interesting. And this one you you propagated this so you could grow it in Minnesota, right?
Yes, we actually planted one of those just outside the sunroom, and it's been there for 2.5 years now and doing beautifully.
Okay, great. The other tree I want to talk about is this corkscrew willow, which is so fun. It's got these squiggly branches. It's an upright willow, and it is a zone 4B willow tree, but there are a couple characteristics of this tree that don't make it super great for our climate. You can still try it if you'd like. The branches apparently can break from ice damage. They can tend to be brittle. And it's a short-lived tree. It's about 15 years, but it's a beautiful specimen tree in the right spot, I think.
Yeah, correct. For us, the only reason I didn't plant one of those in St. Paul also was because it has a very shallow root system.
Okay.
The surface roots can become a tripping hazard.
Oh, oh,
So
gee.
we opted
Okay.
not to do that, even though it's beautiful.
Okay, a couple other shots from Marcus's yard. So here and in this picture on the left, you see yellow's lady slipper. But that is a Minnesota native. It blooms May through June here. And in fact, I think you can go out to the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum right now and see it. You can also find it in woodlands around Minnesota. And then we'll talk about this plant in a minute. It's called the shredded umbrella plant. It's kind of a fun thing. But I just wanted to show you the cold hardiness map just to illustrate what Marcus was doing. So he was going from Seattle up over here. Where is it? Up over here, right?
Yep.
To St. Paul. So he's going from a minimum temperature the minimum temperature that plants can survive from 5 degrees above zero to 25 below. So quite a difference, and that really changes how you garden, right?
Yeah, yes, it did. It was a bit of a challenge, but I enjoy a challenge, especially with gardening.
Okay, but as you'll see, for Marcus, zone does not get in the way for him, and in fact, he's facing a new challenge, gardening challenge, and we'll reveal what it is that is at the end of our talk tonight. So, but Marcus, you enjoy non-hardy plants in the garden. You don't say house plants, right?
Well, no, no. Houseplants are houseplants. These are simply plants that like to summer outside and maybe winter inside.
Okay, okay. So Marcus will join us again a bit later after I tell you a little bit about some of his plans. We'll see you in a bit. So first, let me give you a little tour around his house in St. Paul. The house, of course, as you see, is made out of bricks, and this kind of has an impact on the plants that are around it. It tends to be a little warmer, so for zone pushing plants, that's kind of a nice plus. You can see in the front the effect of massing a plant like purple coneflower in the front with white hydrangeas behind is really effective here and really sets off the house. This is another feature in the front yard. Marcus likes to include edibles. So here's some corn, squash, and this is up on a wall. It's high up on a wall, and the sidewalk, public sidewalk is down below, and Marcus and Gary were very open to letting people who are walking by take some produce if they want. It was a community thing, so. Along the backyard is a fence that Gary and Marcus designed, and they created these window openings with trellises for clematis, and planted every variety they loved of clematis. Here are a couple photos of the clematis on the right of the frame there, so that you'll always see some kind of clematis blooming along the fence. There's a little vegetable garden behind this decorative iron gate. So we managed to squeeze in some vegetables in the garden too. Here's a shot. We'll talk more about the bromeliad collection. And you'll notice some dinosaurs in there. We'll ask Marcus about that later, why he's got dinosaurs in his garden. And then here's behind the house, and this shade area has some of these real zone pushers planted, and we'll take a look at some of those. One thing to describe Marcus's garden, this is a garden of complex layers. So there's layers of zone appropriate, zone pushing, and zone tender plants. Layers of texture, particularly when it comes to foliage, combining leaf shapes. Layers of plant height, layers of plant height, flower color, and plant seasonality. So Marcus is, when he's gardening, he's very conscious of spring ephemerals that might come up first and then die back. And it's replaced by other plants in the season. And Marcus also likes scent. And that's an important aspect for Marcus when he's looking at flowers. But for Marcus, foliage is king. And plant labels are vital. So you can keep track of what plants are tender and need to be coming into the house or the garage, or seeds gathered through the season. So this plant, I just want to talk about this plant for a minute. It's a white-edged leopard plant. It's a zone 7 plant, so this would have to be overwintered. Argentum has a creamy white edge, and it's considered one of the most beautiful and prized member of the genus Farfugium, native to China, Japan, and Korea. And it produces this yellow daisy-like flower on 30-inch stalks in the fall. Very, very fun plant. Love this cream color to it. This is another favorite of mine. In fact, I liked it so much that I went and found it and planted it in my garden this year. It's a shield leaf, Astilboides tabularis. So you see that Latin word tabularis, it's like table, and this really is, it's like an end table or something. It's the leaf, I think I measured it at one point, was 15 inches across. They can get up to 2 to 3 feet in diameter, and it has this, it almost slants up so that it looks like a table, which is really fun. And then the flower spikes, here you can see this just starting in this photo here. It ends up being about 4 feet tall and hangs over the leaf like a lamp over it. And it's a big astilbe-like blossom, maybe the size of your hand. It's that big. So this cluster of white flowers, really fun. Then I want to talk a little bit about how and show you how Marcus plants in layers. So the first plant I want to talk about is green dragon. So here it is, the spirally arranged leaf that's at the top of the screen on the top left of this photo. And it's an ericema, and ericema began to be available in the late 1990s thanks to Dan Hinckley of Heronswood. That might be a name you've heard of before. It's a nursery. He had a nursery out in Washington in the Seattle area. Marcus was able to get there before they closed. But this plant, ericemas, this particular one is native to Minnesota, particularly southeast Minnesota. It's a zone 4 plant, but it looks tropical to me. and it's found in floodplains. It's considered a rare plant species by the Minnesota DNR. So if you do find this plant and put it in your garden, you're helping further this plant species. Here's another picture of it, and you can see a little bit more closely this mottled stem. It's great for deep shade. It can be planted in the sun and it produces a small green flower space, but it's not very noticeable. So a couple interesting facts about green dragon. When the plant is small, it produces only male flowers. Then when it gets about medium size, it produces male and female flowers. And then very large plants may become entirely female. So it is very conflicted about what it is. Green dragon was once a medicinal and ritual plant of the Menominee tribe of Wisconsin, and the root was used to encourage second sight in dreams. Marcus likes them because they're low maintenance and they're up early in the spring when nothing else is going on in the garden. They're coming up with the tulips and the daffodils. So that's green dragon. Let's talk about that shredded umbrella plant. And here it is. You can see the fronds of these leaves, a split leaf, circular leaf here on the screen. And they can be the size of a dinner plate. It's from the aster family, native to Asia and eastern Russia. It's zone 4, best in sun-dappled woodland conditions with consistent moisture, but it does tolerate full shade. And this is pretty shady spot that Marcus has it, so it's still doing well. It naturalizes, moves around with rhizomes in the soil and to form a colony of these plants. What's really fun about it is that it sprouts out of the ground, and you can see this Dancing Oaks nursery photo here that I borrowed from the internet, and it looks like an umbrella coming up that's just about to open. And it has that silvery white woolly hairs, and that kind of dissipates as the plant grows. And the flowers are these small pale pink or white clusters on stems above the plant. They're not very showy. Another plant that I wanted to take a look at in this layering is the cobra lily. So you see these triple leafed plants here. That's the cobra lily. It's another Erasema. It is a zone 6 plant. It can take 3 to 5 years before flowering in the spring, and it has a purple striped spathe flower. That's the flower, and you can kind of see it. It's just emerging here in this photo. It's related to the jack in the pulpit, so it produces a cluster of red berries, and it goes dormant in the summer, like jack in the pulpit often does. It's a part shade to full shade plant. And two other plants worthy of mention here in this photo are spiderwort, and that's a plant that's familiar to a lot of gardeners, and lungwort pulmonaria. Lungwort is a great spring plant, produces beautiful little pink and blue and purpley kind of flowers depending upon the variety. And then you can, depending on the variety, you can get different patterns of white and green on the leaves. It's a very great shade plant. Here's another notable plant in Marcus's garden, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, Tian Nanjing, I think. It's another Erasema, consanguineum, and it's very easy to grow. It's another jack in the pulpit relation from Asia. It's used in Chinese herbal medicine for coughs and colds, and it grows from an underground tuber, and it has this you can see it's slightly mottled pseudostem. It can be anywhere from 2 to 5 feet in height, so pretty tall. But the other interesting trait that I just love about this very foliage intense plant are these drip tips at the end of each leaf. They hang down about 3 to 6 inches, I would say. And then even on the flower, you can see the wine-colored drip tip. And it's a trait that the characteristic of the plant that helps it shed excess moisture. So you can imagine this in a wetter climate, letting the plant shed some of the moisture off the leaves so that it can take in chloroform, taken the sun, is what I'm trying to say. And here's a closer photo of the leaves, and it has this smooth edge. You just want to touch it, don't you? And it's very soft in these folds in the leaves. A beautiful, beautiful plant. Zone 5, and you know, we can push zones a little. It's here next to a brick wall, and so which will make it a slightly warmer, and did very well in Marcus's garden. The next set of photos are of tender plants. So these would be plants you'd have to overwinter with some great foliage. This is the tree of India, or voodoo lily. It's an extremely versatile plant. It tolerates full shade, full sun, so it does everything. It's native to Eastern Asia, subtropical, tropical, and it's in the philodendron family. It comes from a tuber that sends up a single mottled stem. And I'll show you what that looks like. You can kind of see the mottled stem there, and produces these leaflets like a miniature tree. And the buried tubers are hardy to zone 6, by the way. And then after several years, the tuber reaches grapefruit size, so big, and that means it's time to bloom. And so in the spring, what comes up first is this spathe, this reddish purple spathe that can be up to 3 feet tall, and it appears before the stalk and the leaf. The flower smells like dead meat to attract pollinators, which are carrion flies. So this is the tree of India, very exotic, but something that you can get and have fun with in your garden. Here's another one that I'm quite partial to. I just love the name, Spotty Dotty, and it's an Asian mayapple, and it's a variegated hybrid of mayapple, and it produces this pendulous red flower, deep red flower, and then eventually this flower turns into the seed pod that looks like a lemon-shaped fruit, and that's the apple. So hence the name mayapple, and that's the same with our mayapples here in Minnesota that you can see in woodlands. Here are some tender plants that we would definitely say are annuals. This plant on the front here is called a castor bean. It's a native to tropical East Africa. It grows rapidly, vigorously, I would say, and can get as tall as 6 feet to 10 feet as an annual. So it's a great back of the border plant, unless you wanted to cover up everything else. And it has these star-shaped leaves, and then it has kind of these bizarre shiny red seed pods. They eventually turn brown and they split open, and inside are these little beans, hence the castor beans, that look like little tick insects, and we'll see them a little later on. The seeds, I have to mention this, that the seeds have a toxin in them, which is ricin. And if you've heard of ricin, it is one of the deadliest natural poisons. It's 6,000 times more poisonous than cyanide, and 4 seeds can kill an average sized adult. So don't eat them. But if you touch them, you won't be harmed in any way. You can carefully gather the seeds, label them, and put them out of the reach of children. I have seen this plant used in the back of borders at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. Just so you know, they have used it out there. This is also nicknamed the mole plant. You can protect your vegetable crops, potatoes and so on, and it's said to repel moles or voles and underground rodents. So if you have a problem with moles, this might be a plant you'd try. The one on to the right here is an agapanthus called storm cloud, and probably from this blue color, probably gets that name. And agapanthus likes to be root bound in the pot. So Marcus sinks the pot into the ground, and then in the fall just lifts the whole pot out. So it's easier to maintain them that way. But this is a beautiful color combination here with this deep blue with gold sturm, rudbeckia, black-eyed Susan here in the background. This is a canna, an unusual canna in Marcus's garden called Cleopatra, and they sprout from rhizomes. Some people call them bulbs, canna bulbs, but they're really rhizomes. So it's a thickened piece of stem that's thicker, and that produces the plant. And you get this reddish, streaked, paddle-shaped leaves. The flowers are stunning, red and yellow. If the leaves don't do it for you, maybe the flowers will. But it's very unusual and challenging to find. Marcus found this plant at a warehouse plant sale in California and probably brought it home in a suitcase. I'll have to check with him on that, but I think he did. And then this plant onto the photo to the right is called Purple Roscoe's Lily. It's from the Himalayas, particularly Nepal. It's a member of the ginger family, an herb pollinated by a very long-tongued fly. And this species of rose coie grows in much colder mountainous regions. It's great for rock gardens. It flowers from June to September, which is just gets high marks in my book. And you usually get 1 to 2 flowers at a time. They can be light purple to pink to white. And they're usually in tandem like that with the leaves, the stacked up on the leaves and then the flowers at the top. Marcus has several different unusual kinds of impatiens, pretty unusual. So downy mildew is a fungal disease that appeared in Minnesota in 2011, and that affected all those common impatient plants that you see in nurseries is Impatiens walleriana, and it's very devastating. It can kill those plants. But other impatiens varieties like these on your screen here can show minor symptoms such as a few lesions on the leaves, but otherwise they survive. They're very bee friendly. Impatiens balfourii, poor man's orchid or touch me not, is a zone 7, but it's an annual that reseeds itself because it ejects the seeds. Marcus found a seedling in a pot of another plant he brought here from Seattle, and it has since spread around the garden. It is a plant, I have to point out, that is restricted in Wisconsin by the Wisconsin DNR because it's been known to invade and encroach into forests and wetlands and grasslands and marshes. The Minnesota DNR doesn't have that warning out yet, so just so you know. If you have this plant, you've got to make sure that it's contained in your yard. The one next to it, this roaring balsam, is new. In fact, it's likely that nobody you know grows this plant. It was discovered in 2016 in a valley in the Indian Himalayas, and in India it's known as an herb. And has oversized leaves 6 inches long. Flowers May to September, and it can be 4 to 6 feet tall. The blooms appear on the top of the shoots in large clusters, and that just puts them all these beautiful flowers at eye level. Looks kind of like a bird in flight. This plant likes filtered sun or bright shade. It doesn't like lots of heat, and you have to collect the seeds from that plant each year or grow it in a pot. And one more impatiens variety to show you. It's also known as policeman's helmet or ornamental jewelweed or Himalayan balsam. It is considered invasive in some states and can spread aggressively because it too has seed capsules that explode in early to mid-August. And so the plant can send 800 seeds up to 20 feet. However, the pollinators love this. You can put seed bags around the flowers or around the seed pods to capture those seeds so you don't have that spreading issue. But it is an example of the risks involved when you take a plant from one state to another. It can do really well in another state and encroach on becoming invasive. But this is policeman's helmet, and you can kind of see the bee in there having a good time getting the nectar. This is a tropical milkweed. It's a problem in temperate areas like California where it doesn't die back in the winter, but it carries because it carries a parasite of monarch butterflies that persists if the plant is in the ground for a very long period of time. But in Minnesota, that's not an issue here. Marcus discovered that it reseeds naturally in the yard pretty well. And you can see the caterpillar loving it. And it's got these beautiful red flowers with these yellow centers. That's tropical milkweed. And I have seen this for sale at some plant sales locally. This is another fun plant. It's called the pineapple lily. It's a full sun plant. It grows from a bulb that don't start blooming for a year. You have to be patient with this plant, but you can see the pineapple-like top of this. It's really, really super fun. In Minnesota, Marcus started them in pots, and then he'll start them in the pots and then transplant them outdoors after the danger of frost is past. And you can grow them in a deep container and put it in the ground and then just pull the container up to help save the bulbs if you like. So here's a look at the flower with this pineapple top. And it's these white petals with the pink centers and the yellow stamens. Very lovely. Kind of looks like a cone dog if you're thinking Minnesota State Fair. But that's the pineapple lily. A couple more tender foliage plants. This one is a begonia called Paul Hernandez. It's a zone 9B plant, so it's really an annual for us, or you can try to overwinter it. It takes light shade, it has dangling pink flowers. So in California, this would grow 6 to 8 feet tall. It's considered a shrub, but here it's 2 to 3 feet tall. But has the coolest leaves, these wrinkled, crinkly leaves with the serrated edge. Beautiful begonia plant. And the plant on the right with these interesting paddle-shaped leaves that are coming out of that center is hardy tapioca or hardy cassava. And in Mexico and Argentina, it's a cassava tree. It grows 12 feet tall. Here it does not. We just don't have a long enough season for it to do that. It's not native to the United States. It has pretty insignificant green flowers on this plant, but the bees love it. They just go crazy for hardy tapioca. And a couple more unusual finds in Marcus's garden that I wanted to mention. Blackberry lily or leopard lily. It's not a true lily, but a member of the iris family. And it is a short-lived perennial. It's native to Eastern Russia, China, and Japan, but it has this very lovely kind of peachy orange color with the dots on it. Lovely, lovely flower. Next to it is columbine called gold leaf variety, and the foliage is vivid chartreuse like it is here in shade, but if it's in a sunny site, it is a bright golden yellow foliage. And then it has these rich raspberry colored flowers in May. Zone 5 plant. And finally, the one on the bottom is a Japanese ligularia. It blooms in May, and Zone 4 plant has a jagged leaf, and the blossom is 3 to 4 inches across. So let's quickly take a look at some of the bromeliads that Marcus has, something you and I might consider a house plant, but for Marcus, it's just a plant that moves indoors and outdoors. And his first experience with bromeliads was when he bought one on a trip to San Diego, probably put it in the suitcase. And then when he moved to Minnesota, he joined the St. Anthony Park Garden Club, and a club member encouraged Marcus to volunteer in the bromelia department at the Como Park Conservatory. And as you can see, his collection began to grow. So bromeliads are in the pineapple family. They're native to North and South America, the tropical parts of North and South America. Some bromeliads grow in the ground. Half of them grow on trees and rocks. They're epiphytes, in other words, and they take their moisture in through their roots that are exposed. Marcus loves these plants because they're so easy. They have beautiful color in the leaves, and as a lucky bonus, they sometimes bloom. So they don't produce fungus gnats, attract spider mites or mealybugs. The one caveat is that you have to wear gloves. The serrated edges of the plants can poke you in your hands if you're not wearing gloves. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ones, bromeliads up close. Love the stripes, the horizontal stripes on this one. This is a kind of a V pattern running down the leaf of this one. Here's one that's red with green polka dots, very fun. And here's a striped one. So there's lots of variety, and I'm sure there's one here that we'll all probably fall in love with at one point or another. As for the flowers, tank bromeliads, this is a tank bromeliad, Acmea variety, has leaves that form a reservoir, and they store water in this reservoir at the base, and with the largest bromeliads can hold up to 2 gallons of water. And the flowers can either be so tiny and inconspicuous as they are here in this photo, which barely rise above the water in the center of the plant, or they can be show-stopping with fluorescent colored blooms. Bromeliads only flower a single time, and after the bloom, the plant creates offsets or pups, little plantlets, new plantlets, which feed off the mother plant until they're large enough to set roots of their own and survive as a separate plant. So that's bromeliads, and this last photo is these last 2 pictures, I should say, are Marcus's pictures. So thanks to Marcus for contributing those. Marcus, if you want to join me again, we'll talk about how you overwinter some of these things.
Oh. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Well, thank you. You really make my garden shine. I love seeing it through your eyes.
You're welcome. So here you are. I think you were digging up a pineapple lily bulb, and then
Yes,
on the right side, you were digging up the tubers of the tree of India, right?
yes, getting ready to, it must be late fall, getting things ready to overwinter, bringing them inside before our freeze.
Okay. And so then where do you put them? Where do you keep them over winter?
Well, different plants in different places, but these 2 items are bulb-like, tuber-like, so they are cleaned off and stored in the basement where it doesn't get below freezing, and it stays around 50 degrees with, a low humidity. It's an ideal area to store tubers, bulbs, a lot of
Okay.
those things.
Okay. So I understand though, one year that you had it in the basement and it started blooming and you weren't home and you got a call from Gary.
Yes, I got a panicked call from Gary. He thought something had died in the basement. And no, it was just the Amorphalis. As you pointed out earlier, the flower comes up prior to the leaf.
Yeah.
And the bulbs don't care if they're planted in the ground or not. When it's time, they send up their flower. And yes, so I had to move everything out onto the patio so he could live in the house while I was gone.
I can imagine. So here's another thing that Marcus does is he's got a lot of flowers inside the house. The sunroom is packed full of plants. And you also keep them in your garage, right?
Yes, the ones that go in the sunroom are plants that can stay alive throughout the winter, such as some of the fuchsias and the tapioca plant, but things that need a dormancy, yes, those go out into the garage where, again, I have a small heater in there so it stays just above freezing, but they can go dormant without going to -35.
Okay, okay. So I'm going to scoot along here to make sure we've got time for questions. You also gather seeds. So here are the castor bean seeds that kind of look like little ticks there, that Marcus is holding in his hand. And then this is a chocolate daisy plant that has a great feature, right?
Yes, it smells like chocolate brownies, warm brownies, first thing in the morning. And
Wow.
yes, I can smell it right now.
It blooms from late spring until frost, and it is a zone 4 plant, so that might be something you might want to look for, chocolate daisy. And let's just go through some of your gardening tips for the folks listening today.
Okay. Well, personally, I would highly recommend people joining a local garden group or club. I get a lot of wonderful information there and share plants. Also subscribing to a gardening magazine such as Northern Gardener. Has wonderful articles, great information. I've learned a lot from that, and gardening groups. But then on a personal front beyond that, experiment. Don't be afraid to try new things. Plants typically aren't terribly expensive, and if it doesn't survive, well, then it's compost for whatever you plant there next.
Right.
And I enjoy, yes, playing with different leaf shapes, sizes, colors, textures, livening things up, keeping it different along with layers. And yes, I plant things together that hopefully enjoy similar conditions. And again, as far as experimenting, I plant zone sensitive plants outside also, but closer to the house, so they have more moderation in their zone. Maybe, we're in a zone 4, but you can get away with zone 5.
Right.
Much more than that, you probably want to dig it up and bring it in.
Right.
There's a lot you can do that way. I also heavily mulch in the fall, again, to help moderate and hold in temperature. Personally, I prefer pine needles. The people behind us have a giant pine tree, and every year they were hauling away bags to the yard waste place. It was like, can I have those? You can just dump them right across the street here. You don't have to drive miles away. Also, using the natural things like pine needles, using the snow in the winter. As I clear paths, I would pile snow on the more sensitive areas that needed to have their temperature moderated more, because snow is a great insulator.
Okay.
So,
okay. And quick tip about overwintering plants in the garage, don't forget to water them.
Yes, don't forget to water them, because that'll kill them very slowly, but it'll do them in. That's
Now, Marcus has a new gardening challenge along with his husband, Gary. He is moving zones again. And so he's going from zone 4B to zone 9B, which is minimum temperature of 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So that sounds like easy peasy to me. But you were telling me that this is gardening in reverse from
well,
Minnesota.
Yes, it's simply going to be a new challenge for different things. Some of the plants that I had to bring in to overwinter can now stay outside overwinter. The bromeliads, they can stay out longer in the fall, but we actually do dip down into the 30s in the winter. Usually not for prolonged, but when those nights happen, I should be able to simply put a large cloth over items like that.
Okay.
So they'll make it. But then I also enjoy a lot of plants that actually need a dormancy and a winter period.
Mm.
So those in Minnesota would be in the ground and you'd pile on the snow and the mulch to help insulate. Here, I'm doing exactly the opposite and growing those above ground in pots. Because if they're in the ground over winter, the ground stays warmer, but in pots, they're fully exposed to the winter element, so they will get that 30-degree chill that they need. So yes, kind of a flip of what I was doing in Minnesota. And
Okay.
I'll let you know how it works.
Okay. All right. And I just wanted to show your, this is all in the back of the house, right? So you have a clean slate for a garden. So Marcus just moved in at the end of May. So just a few weeks ago, he
Yes,
left
just a few weeks.
Minnesota. And that's why he's enjoying a lot cooler weather than we are. And then before we do questions, I just wanted to bring this photo up. And I think this is part of the handout that you may be sent for attending this webinar, and it has these links on there: Far Reaches, Keeping It Green, Plant Delights, Annie's Annuals and Perennials, Cartou's Greenhouses, the Friends School Plant Sale. Yes, I can also say, agree that that has lots of unusual plants there, local nurseries and other garden club members, great places to look for plants. So what can we answer anybody's questions from what you've been hearing? Deborah, you want to come back?
Yes. There are a number of questions. I'm going to add something to what you were saying about the castor bean plant.
Okay.
First of all, please, if you have a cat or a dog, don't plant it. Because unless you're going to be able to reliably keep them away from it, because even a nibble can make them extraordinarily ill just from the leaves.
Okay.
So
Good.
please be careful. As for it being an anti-mold device, I can say that yes, it does. We did have one question about the blackberry lily. What was the Latin you had for it? Is it the same one as Iris domestica? Was the question.
Let's see. We'll go back. There.
Yeah.
Bellum canda chinensis.
Huh.
I do not believe it's the same as the Iris domestica, but there are two different colorations of the blackberry lily. There's this orange one and there's one that's much more yellow, but it wouldn't have, that different a name.
Huh. Okay. So there was a bit of confusion. Oh, I see why. Yeah, also known as leopard lily. Well, Bellum chata chinensis. Ah, yes, sorry. In 2005, they transferred it. They changed it.
Oh, okay.
That would be it. Okay. I figured it was something like that, like the whole thing with asters not being asters anymore, or being I don't remember which way it went, but
well,
sometimes terminology gets changed.
Oh yes, from the beginning of our talk today to the end, at least 5 or 6 plants have had their nomenclature changed.
Just happens.
Yes.
What else,
it's funny because honestly, it's funny because it's true. It really is. Do you have any suggestions for people who are starting to collect bromeliads, we have someone who's written in that after it flowered, the whole plant just went into this horrible decline. And is that what often happens? And what do you do?
Well, bromeliads, by their very nature, yes. When the parent plant has finished flowering, the flower fades, and oftentimes it will produce small plants around the base called pups. And then the main plant that flowered dies. Sometimes it doesn't produce pups, but they usually do. If this was bought recently at a grocery store or someplace like that in flower, it's not as likely that it will have produced pups because they cut off the main plant and sell it, and they keep any offsets so they can keep producing them themselves.
Okay.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What would you suggest starting with for somebody who wants to start a collection?
Of bromeliads?
Yep.
Oh, I would, one of the local places that has a great selection would be the Como Park Conservatory. Outside their gift shop, they have some pups that they have separated from the mothers for sale. They tend to be fairly reasonable in price, and you will, as you can see from the picture below, get a variety to grow and start with, and within a few years they'll bloom and produce pups of their own for you to share with others.
And our last question is, because it's all about bromeliads tonight, do they have any specific soil needs for potting soil?
Yes, they want very well draining, but something that holds a little bit of moisture also. So if
it looks like you have some kind of bark here, right, in this one?
Correct. I mix up a variety of things, but the easiest to do would be to get a cactus mix and orchid bark and do about a 50-50 of that, and that gives you a very good medium to grow them in. My only caveat with that is I grow them in plastic pots, which means that they're very top heavy. So either grow them in a ceramic pot or put rocks in the bottom of the pot to simply balance out the weight. So I put rocks in the bottom of the pot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good plan.
Cool.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. And thank you everyone for attending. Okay, Gail, thank you both very much.
You're welcome.
And on behalf of the Minnesota State Horticultural Society, thank you for joining us today, and stay safe.
Bye. I hope you have a restorative summer in your garden.
I will. You too.